Hey guys, welcome into the Shadow Box. I am Carlise, your host. I am your grief and trauma coach. I am also your shadow work guide. Today with us, we have Angel Rodriguez. Angel is housed in Chicago, and he is an author. The author of His Name is Suicidal. And this particular episode is more geared towards trauma, geared towards your shadow side, and with a pinch of grief in there as well. And we are going to turn it over to Angel now. And Angel, just give us some more information about yourself.
Thank you. Um, Always I want this to be posted that you're a great person, and getting to meet you was an honor. So I thank you again. Yeah, my name is Angel Rodriguez. I'm a senior. I got 5 kids. They're grown. They're married. They have kids of their own. I have 12 grandkids, beautiful grandkids. I'm from an
12?
area. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, my youngest, my first grandson, he's actually like 6'4". I mean,
Wow.
he's up there, yeah. And one of them just turned 18, so I have him from the range from a few months old to 22. I think he's 23 now, junior. Yeah, so it's 12. It's from 5 kids, so they're separate. And from Chicago, like you said, I'm from an area called Humboldt Park. It's on the northwest side of Chicago. It's it's predominantly known for crime, although it's got gentrified, as they call it, this past decade. It's still crime here, but there's a lot of beautiful things there, and there's still a lot of beautiful people that I was, you know, grandparents and parents that were raised there. That I beautiful people. Um, yeah. Other than that, yeah, I'm an author. I wrote. Always been my dream to write. So I wrote this book. His name is Suicidal. It's a memoir about a darkness in my life. I'm an artist, a local artist here in Chicago. Um, I guess I don't mention it much, but I was incarcerated. The reason I'm mentioning it, I think, because it has part to do with my life. I was incarcerated for 18 years for an attempt murder that I had nothing to do with, nor did I know the people. And through the grace of God, after coming out of prison, the lawyers took over and they reopened part of the case, which is it's back in the courtroom, and there's positive things coming out, and my evidence is showing. I was raised by my grandparents and my mom because she always lived next to us. I got 6 sisters, 7 because my dad adopted one, but 4 from my dad's side, which are my stepsisters, beautiful people, but they live so far. A couple of them near the UK. Then I got 3 sisters I was born with, my mom, and we're close. I come from a close knit family. Um, my uncles, I've always considered them my brothers. I don't have no natural biology brothers, but my
Mhm.
uncles were brothers to me, and my aunt Mita, and then I have my cousin Chiquita, which is the same thing. We're a close family. My grandparents passed away some years ago, which were the Barack. They were my everything.
Yeah.
And my mom, she's still with us, thank God.
Yeah. Yeah. So go ahead and give us a little rundown of your early life. So I know that you said that you were raised by your grandparents,
Mhm.
and mom was usually just right next door. She lived in close proximity to you guys.
Mhm.
So tell me about your neighborhood. Tell me about being raised by your grandparents and just that earlier part of your childhood.
Yeah, we wow. From my earliest that I remember was the neighborhood where I grew up, which it wasn't far from Humboldt Park. It wasn't far from Humboldt Park, but it was more towards another park called Ecker Park. So it wasn't we're jumping a skip from Humboldt, but yeah, it was a small neighborhood. It wasn't like a long block. This block was one of those like half a block, so we all knew each other. There was no more than 10 houses on each side of the street, so it was a small block. Everybody knew each other. At that time, it wasn't like now. At that time, especially as a little boy, I would roam around with my little buddies, and sometimes, a lot of times, by myself because I was very adventurous. I loved it going into abandoned buildings and fix things. I loved it to build um, houses, like little clubhouses, and I just loved it, climbing roofs and things. And I always been into sports, so even at that early age, 5, 6 years old, my uncles were already taking me outside and showing me sports, and so I was extremely big on sports. Our school was maybe a half a block, if that, from our home. So we
Okay.
lived with my grandmother, my grandfather, me, my sister, my cousin, and then my three uncles, my aunt, well, my four uncles, but I have one that was closer to my age. So my
Mhm.
four uncles and my aunt, we all lived with my grandparents. So it was maybe a 2 bedroom apartment, which the pantry we made a bedroom. But we were so close. We were very close. The boys and the girls we were extremely close. And my mom had my sisters on either in the same building or maybe a block or two away. And the only reason I wind up living with my grandparents, I was, I must have been very, very young because I remember always being my grandmother. But my mom was always in my life. She was always there every day to make sure I was in school, bring food. She took me places, so it wasn't. I just always thought I had two moms. That I always felt to me it was just two moms. But I was just such a big grandmother baby. You know, she took me everywhere with her. I was My grandparents were probably what you would think of Mother Teresa in these days. Because
Okay.
as far as my grandmother, she was just this lady that I remember having friends come over and she would feed everybody. And we were living on state money, on public money. So we didn't have, we were literally poor like everybody else on the block. So, um, but she would make, for some reason, she knew how to make everyone eat. There was
Yeah.
enough for everybody. Rather, it was two sandwiches, everybody's going to eat. And then my grandfather, he was into alcoholic in his early years, and in the 70s, he gave his life to God. And when he became a Christian, he never again turned back.
That's
And
good.
yeah, he never again, I mean, for maybe 5 decades, he was just a great man of church, a great father, a great provider. He was just a man of a man. And I look at my grandmother as a Mother Teresa. I look at my grandfather as maybe a Martin Luther King. He had that type of spirit that
Yeah.
he walked. He just had this respect for everybody and this love for everybody. That everybody in the block, even as we got older and I joined gangs and stuff, even the gang members used to have this high respect for them. So yeah, I had a very very beautiful to me childhood.
Yeah. That's awesome. I mean, especially to have and it's culture too, because you're Puerto Rican, right?
Yes,
And
yes,
so that culture is not it's not abnormal for families to
yeah,
live conjoined
mhm,
like that with a good amount of people in one home,
yes,
but it's that, like you said, a close knit family.
yeah.
And you actually played a sport when you were a child too, right?
Yeah, I actually football, basketball, I was always in it, but baseball was
Mhm.
my number one. Yeah, so baseball was the thing, and I played all the sports even in school, but baseball was the one that if the right maybe coaches or the right area if I would have been involved, I think the trajectory would have been so much greater. And because of the talent that I had, and I joke with people, but when it comes to baseball, it's the only thing in my life that I can be 100% almost talk about myself about,
Yeah.
because I was born with this great talent for baseball. And then that coupled with my uncles showing me as a kid, I was with them showing me the ropes of baseball, how to, so if I had the right area, I want to say, because the area where we grew up, it wasn't good. And then Humboldt Park definitely at the time wasn't easy. Um, but I think the trajectory would have been just baseball. It would have went pretty far.
Yeah.
I do believe that.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and talk about the trajectory, right? Because
Yes.
your history, your childhood even was a little traumatic.
Yeah.
And it was not so much family based traumatic, but it was things on the outside that kind of took your life in a different direction. So go ahead and start to walk us through where trauma really started to become real for you.
Yeah, the earliest I remember, and let me just say, I this ain't a subject that I like feel 100% comfortable speaking, but it's one that I continue speaking about it when it needs to be or when people have a question, because I think it's extremely important. And it took me all these years to realize that I wasn't the only one in this world that goes through that. But at a very young age, and I want to pinpoint it to maybe 8, 9, because maybe a couple years later is when we moved not far to Humboldt Park. So this was, I want to say maybe 8 or 9. I was same neighborhood. We knew everybody, but in that neighborhood, you always had a couple guys or whatever come from another neighborhood with the guys from that neighborhood, and there was always these, what we call them bullies, I guess today. They were the ones you're afraid of because they're maybe a few years older than you. They were the big guys, bullies. And it just so happened that I started being abused by them sexually, and it happened more than once. I can't count. I don't remember, but I do know it happened more than one time, and I do know that. And it was an experience that even today there was times when I felt guilty. And the reason I felt guilty is because I knew I could. If I would have went to my mom and told her, they would have helped. If I would have went to anybody in my family, they would have helped. If I would have went to some of the older friends, they would have helped.
Yeah.
So sometimes I tell myself, why didn't I do that? But as you explained before, as a kid, it's different than our minds when we get older.
Yeah.
Because I do remember their threats, which now that I've gotten older, I realize is common for
Yeah.
abusers. And their threats was if I tell my uncles, because they knew my uncles, they see them with me. So if I tell my uncles that they're gonna hurt my family, that the guys are gonna hurt my family, and I knew if my uncle, my mom would have found out, they would have went out and did something,
Yeah.
and I was afraid they would have went to prison, and I didn't
Yeah.
want my uncles to go to prison, and at the same time, I didn't want nobody in my family to get killed because I believed
Yeah.
them guys. I believe they would have done something. Rather they would have or not, I don't know.
Yeah.
But that was fear enough.
But the one thing that you have brought to my attention is that these were older teenagers, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah. Well, they were, from what I remember, they were. If I was 8 or 9, I think they were just starting to hit maybe 12. I want to say even teenage age, starting to get that
okay.
teenage age. So they were maybe 4 or 5 years older. They were, I maybe even already in high school getting, well, I was still
Okay.
in little grammar school. So yeah, they had already been in high school. So, they were those same guys that people see you're afraid of because they're older and
Yeah.
it's, they had their generation. They're like a generation above you.
Yeah. And in that clique of guys, it wasn't just one of them that was sexually abusing you. It was more than one in that same clique.
From the reason I remember there was more, because, and I know I mentioned this before, and it's almost odd thing to remember because I don't remember faces, and maybe that was my defense way to
Yeah.
ask God. I forced myself some way, somehow, throughout all the years. Don't remember faces,
Hmm.
but what I do remember that's so strange and odd, and even nervous to talk about it. It's a laugh,
Yeah.
and I remember there was an abandoned building on the corner. They had me there and they took me there, and they were doing things that a young kid shouldn't experience at all, male, female, whatever. In fact, no adult should had to experience that.
Yeah.
And I'm embarrassed to even say that. Um, but I remember them laughing, so I knew there was more than a couple. It had to be 2 or 3 because I remember while certain things were happening to me, they were laughing,
Mm.
and throughout the years, the pain of what was happening to me stopped, but it always hurted me more of the laugh.
Yeah.
Because even as I became a young adult, you look at people and you wonder, does he knows what happened to me? Or does that
Hmm.
person knows what happened to me? Or when they talk about that subject in school or something, you try to sit in a way where it doesn't make it obvious that you went through it.
Yeah.
Because the laugh alone was so embarrassing
Yeah.
because it made me feel even as a young adult that I was, or this is years later when I'm
Mhm.
already that happened to, but it still made me feel like I was like a piece of garbage in this world and I never probably question no one. I question myself. Why did I become? I don't know why. I don't know why the laughs. I don't know why that stuck to me, but not the faces.
Yeah. And as a man, as a boy or as a man, when you're being taken advantage of like that, and we're talking about an 8-year-old boy compared to 12, 13, 14, 15-year-old
Mhm.
boys, I mean, where's that strength really going to come from, right? And so when you are talking about they're laughing, that's just emasculating.
Very much.
That's just a part of just I am a boy growing into a man and I can't defend myself,
Very much so. Yeah.
and so I can only imagine how embarrassing that was, or just challenging to your growing manhood.
hmm And even at that age, I think even as a young age, a male, you still it's different. You know that this is, you get this like you just said, your manhood. Even at that age, you know it. And I'm sure when it happens to a young girl, of course, it's nothing. It's not easier, of course. But just as a male perspective, it was something that carried on because you don't want to voice it to nobody.
Yeah,
Even to this day, I'm 56, and to this day, we spoke about it a few times with different people through events. And the only reason I do it because I know that I wasn't the only one in this world that it happened to or that it will happen to. And I think if, like you said, you talked about a purpose when we talked off camera,
yeah,
and it makes so much sense the way you put it. It's true. We all have a purpose, and I when I wrote the book, I mentioned that and the stuff that happened, and I hope that that's part of my purpose, and I hope that the men, and I specifically men, like grown men, even buddies of mine, that I don't think from everyone that I knew that I'm the only man in that circle. The whole 20 years, 2 decades out there in the world. I don't think it happened just to me. And I've seen some great men and women documentaries or whatnot speak about their lives, and I always marveled them to be so open and to be so courageous because it helped me. So I always told myself while I was writing the book, who am I to write, but then ignore the parts that might help others.
yeah,
So that's what feeds me. The embarrassment's gonna be there. I don't know how long it'll be there because it's still there.
yeah.
But I force myself and to say it. I force myself to talk about it. I'll answer any question because I think it's important. So yeah,
Yeah, and it's all relevant, right?
relevant.
Because again, when we talk about that aspect of purpose,
Yes.
we were just talking about how it
Mhm.
doesn't, there's so many crazy things that go on in the world. And there are horrible things that go on in the world, nasty things that go on in the world, violent things, all this stuff that was here way before our time.
Mm.
People were doing this stuff way prior, you know?
Yes.
And so things that pass down generational, because
Mhm.
we have, for those boys to be that young and for it to be more than one of them, and for other boys to know, we have
Wow.
no idea what the heck passed down through their line, through their lineage that made them think that that was okay, or what was going on in their home that made them
Yeah.
think that that was
Yes.
okay, right?
Yeah, 'cause I never
But
thought of it.
yeah, and so when we think about the trauma of it all, it
Mhm.
is definitely a part of your purpose, as hurtful and as you want to be like, God, really? Why?
Yeah.
That part.
Mhm.
But that's where we learn to use it according to our purpose. And so being able to meet other young boys where they are, the ones that don't have a voice, the ones who don't know how to, were just in the shoes that you were in. Like, I
Yeah.
don't know how to tell my parents. I don't know how to tell my
Mhm.
brother. I don't know how to tell, I just know that this happened to me. And so, or it's happening to me. But even in a little boy's mind, it's still like, well, shouldn't I be bigger than this? I'm
Yeah.
supposed to suck it up, and I'm supposed to, I'm supposed to be like my uncles because those are men, man. How would they feel if they knew that this, all these things that go
Mhm.
on in your mind, right? But going back to your purpose, now you can help others. Now you can help other young boys. You can go, and as you were talking about baseball, And, I know that we were talking about purpose before we hopped on.
Mhm.
It kind of popped in my mind like, maybe as he's working with these boys, if that's where he just starts to go, maybe he can do a little league,
Mhm.
a little baseball, something to get them out of their head and get comfortable talking about it, but still give them that strength to overcome, so to speak. So that's just the idea. I'm popping up with those ideas.
No, it
But
was a good idea. It's well, it what's good about it. I mean, you're touching on a lot of things that it's like it's really truth because you actually just hit on something that it was actually you hit on it indirectly, not knowing.
Mhm.
But baseball, no matter how unrecognizable it's going to sound to other people,
Yeah.
but for me, and I'm sure for countless of people, baseball when I got into diamond, rather it was to play a game or practice, the world and anything that happened in the world, it wasn't there.
Yeah.
For some reason, that baseball diamond took me away for that hour or two from the rest of the world.
Yeah.
It's where I felt safe. It's where I felt alive. I felt good. I knew how to play the sport. I had knowledge of the sport. I was important. You know what? So
Yeah.
it's crazy how a little thing that you just mentioned, and I'm sure it can help others, baseball,
Yeah.
sports, or whatnot. Because it was big for me. It was actually a big thing for me.
Yeah. And definitely because, people don't think about being outside of their trauma. Right.
Hmm.
And being outside of your trauma means that I'm doing the work on me. I am healing because we're never just going to be healed. There's always going to be things that's going to come up. Being in the world and living is a continual healing process, no matter what. Right. And so coming outside, being able to get to a point where you've healed enough to not not keep it all on the inside, but say, okay, now I can help other people. Now I can present something to the world where I can at least meet a person where they are. I can meet that boy where he is. Those boys who are, again, like we were talking about in foster homes or in the incarcerated areas
Hmm.
that have been, that they've been experiencing sexual abuse in, like all of these things. Because where's the outlet?
Yeah.
Now you have done the work, and now you get to become their outlet. You get to become their safe haven in the way that you're purposed to.
And it's not in vain. So it makes everything that happened not in vain,
I
which
was
is
you
awesome.
took it right out my mouth. Yes. Yes.
Which is
Yeah.
awesome.
So we that was going on with you for about, you
Mhm.
said maybe about 2 years, a year and a half, 2 years.
Yeah, I have 1.5 to 2 years. I want to say, because not long after that, we wound up moving. We
Okay.
went across to Humboldt Park, and then it stopped because those bullies weren't there.
Okay.
However, if I may, I know you mentioned it before to talk about it. We were talking about this, and once we moved to Humboldt Park, I was 10, maybe going on 11. Well, less than 3, 4 years later, I got into the gangs. At about
Okay.
age 14, 15, that's I started. And not voluntarily at first. I didn't want to join gangs, but they were always around. And they knew my uncle, they knew my aunt, my sister. So the older fellas, the leaders of the gang were always around and they were cool with me. And they gave me this sense of, damn, I know them. So I'm gonna walk around. Nobody else is gonna be able to, jump me or none of that.
Yeah.
But what wind up happening as a couple years passed, still young, I was given most. I played baseball across the park, the other side of the park, which was one gang, and I lived in this side of the park, which was the gang that they both fight.
Mm.
So every time I went to play baseball, that gang would chase me or be in the baseball field talking crazy, and I'm nervous. And when I come back here, some of the gangs here think I'm in that gang. So
Yeah.
it kept going back and forth, and I just wanted to play baseball and do some. And so because my buddies, my friends were in this gang, I wind up joining. And no matter, it took maybe a year because they kept telling, especially one guy used to always tell me, turn today, turn to that. But when I turned, I felt guilty because I thought of my grandmother because I knew I just hurted her there. That moment, I knew I hurted her.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I felt like that thought of as a kid, I felt like, let it come happen again. I felt this power, like I felt really powerful, like, let it come on down. Let's do this. Let's do this
Yeah.
now that I'm older. Let's see
Yeah.
how you get away. It was almost like a direct message, like, now I'm in this gang, and you were so tough when I was a kid. Come on,
Hmm.
buddies, try me now.
Yeah.
Almost like a manhood, like getting my manhood back. And
Yeah.
maybe that wasn't the right way. It definitely wasn't the right way to join
Yeah, but
gang.
what else would you, how else would you think to do so? And we're talking about environment, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
being a subject of your environment. And so, with that being said, if that's in the environment and that's an option for you to be safe, then that's what a whole lot of people do,
yes,
and so I can totally understand you saying, now that I am a part of something, I don't walk around by myself.
yeah,
I am
yeah.
affiliated, because I mean, affiliation is big.
Hmm.
Sometimes you don't even have to be a part of the gang, you can
Right,
just be affiliated with the gang
right.
and you're protected, right?
That's
But
right.
so that was a sense of protection, and
Hmm.
that was a sense of, I they're my friends, they're not necessarily my family. And so
Hmm.
and you're thinking that I'm
Yes.
keeping my family out of the woods here, but I know my friends, they're going to ride for me, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I
Uh-huh.
know that my friends are going to
Right.
that they're going to be a part of this, and I'm not having to do this alone.
Mm-hmm.
And
hundred
you're going to
percent.
think twice about approaching me because you know who I'm connected with,
Mm-hmm. hundred
you know.
percent. That's identical.
And so you joined the gang, and it gave you a sense of identity,
Yes.
okay? Because you did have, yes, you had your family, but we're kind of like separating. That's why I said this trauma was outside of family.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So here you go with your identity. And we also talked about a little bit, like, dad wasn't in the home. I think you knew
Yeah,
who
yeah,
dad was and eventually started to build
yeah.
that relationship.
Right. He left when I think my mom was pregnant with me, or I was just born. So he was abusive to my mom. So they divorced, I think, right after I was born, or in
Mhm.
that timing. So I never see my dad. Me and my sister would see him probably once, I want to say once a year. He
Okay.
lived like 3 hours away, 3, 4 hours away in another state. So he would pick us up, take us to him with my stepsisters for the weekend. Sometimes once in a great once, 1 or 2 years for the summer, like for 2 weeks of the summer. But he was never home when we
Yeah.
were there. He was always working. So he would come home at 10, 11 at night, take his bath, and he goes in his room. There was never emotional ties.
Yeah. And so, with that being said, there goes your identity too. So, you were being stripped
Yeah.
of your identity very, very early. And yes, grandmother and grandfather and
Yeah.
even mom, they were your safe haven. But when
Yes.
you don't have that man that's really that you came from, that you're
Mhm.
supposed to have their last name, or
Yeah.
you're their pedigree, so to speak, that does something else to you. And with that being said, now, okay, dad is not in the home.
Yeah.
Now I go out in the streets and I become a victim of sexual abuse by men. This
Hmm.
is, or boys. This is what's going on with my identity here. Okay, now I can find a gang. And so I have something to say that I'm really a part of. Some sort of manhood, right? I
Yeah.
have I have them. There goes my
Hmm.
identity.
It's
And
true.
so you were trying to find your identity through all of this because it kept being stripped from you. And so, with you saying, like, they became your protection and became your safe haven in the streets, but that's what you identified to.
Yeah, I mean, you hit it right on. You hit it right in the middle of the spot. In fact, even my name was changed.
Mm,
When you join a gang, now I gave myself a street name. I wasn't known no more of my birth name. I wasn't known of nothing. I was known now for my street name.
yeah.
That name wind up becoming, everybody that knew me of that name.
Hmm.
Exactly what you just said, the identity.
Yeah.
Even even in my age when I wind up getting married and had a family, even then I had two separate identities. I had the identity of home with the kids, and but then I had that identity outside, which was totally different.
Yeah.
So it
And
definitely.
let's go into that because it's coming right on down the line when we're talking about identity. Your first marriage, talk about your first marriage because that
Well,
was, you guys loved each other. You were in the marriage, but you had these two different identities.
yeah,
But you were also coming in with an identity that was preconditioned
yeah,
that caused you to act out in certain ways. Talk to us about that.
yeah. Well, it was my. I'm actually engaged, you know.
Hmm.
I'm not. We're not married yet, but we'll be married. But that was my only marriage. We were young. You know, I think so many teenagers when you're young, you do decisions that we just didn't know at the time. But yeah, I actually got in relationship with her. She was my first really woman. You know, when I was a kid, I had puppy love, but
Wait, so the woman that you're engaged to now was the woman you were married to then?
no, no,
Oh, okay,
no.
okay.
This was actually she lived a couple. She lived a couple blocks down from where we lived, but in the same. It was the gang where I lived. She was into school and all that. She wasn't into gangs and all that. Her when I met her, it was almost like a shy thing because I never been with a female. I never had intercourse yet,
Yeah.
um, let alone even really kiss a girl. I had a puppy love crush when I was younger, but that was just go to her house, play with toys, we're gone. So with this one, the feelings were strong, and she was the first girl that I really kissed. She was the first girl that we wind up having sex, and we ran away twice because her mother didn't want her with me because that's when I started getting the gangs. That's when
Okay.
I started. Even she hated the fact when she found out that I joined the gang.
Yeah.
She couldn't stand it. But we're young, so her mom's when she got pregnant, her mom said, "Well, you're gonna have to live with us and take care of the baby." So I did. I wind up at age 16. I wind up working for Walgreens, and I was doing good working Walgreens. But that gang identity followed me still. I was just recent in the gang, so it wasn't like I
Mm.
left it. Um, then we had the baby. We wind up moving in the same building of her mom. We had an apartment. We had a nice little cozy apartment. And then it seemed like the identity from the streets switched so quick because I became such. It took complete over.
Yeah.
I was good at home. I loved it. Even when I had my kids, I loved it, my kids. But then I just got into everything that gang life brings,
Wow.
which was the gang banging, the drug sales, the drug use, the womanizing. And it kept happening. And I wind up even throughout the years, through two long affairs, I had two separate kids from those
Mm.
affairs, from
Yeah.
two separate affairs. So it took over. I mean, but that was it's crazy because that's who I felt I was more was the nickname.
Mm.
I was more at home because when I
Yeah.
get home, I loved my kids, but I brought a lot of that. My kids paid for that because a lot of times I wasn't home.
Yeah.
My ex-wife definitely suffered a lot through it because she was tired of and yeah, so we wind up being together. We legally got married probably like 7 8 years while we were together, and then we got married probably like 8 years later. And you know, we lasted maybe another I don't know 6 years, and then um, later on, I guess, or if you'd like to know, I wind up going to prison, but we were already separated almost a year before I wind up going. I'm getting arrested for a wrongful conviction case.
Yeah. And
That
let's
was,
go back to the womanizing part
Mhm.
because this is still tied into the sexual abuse.
Mhm.
And when like you said, she was the first one that you had ever been with.
Yeah,
And so
both of us.
you both of you
Yeah,
guys.
yeah,
And so for you to come in as a teenager,
yeah,
okay, a hormonal teenager
Mhm.
with this identity, with this shadow behind you, so to speak, of I have already had sexual experiences with boys forcefully,
yeah,
and I'm coming into this marriage or I'm coming into this relationship with the first girl that I thought was the only one giving me attention because I remember you saying like I really didn't get too much attention. I was just a little scraggly
yeah,
boy and
yeah,
all of that.
yeah.
So with
Hmm.
that being said, coming into it and you hit the gangs, you're getting the money, you're out there in the streets, your name is getting out there, and now the girls are coming. Now
Yeah.
they're coming. And this, like you said, joining the gang was a way for you to identify yourself.
Yeah.
And now the girls are coming, giving you another reason, another way to identify yourself,
More
another
attention.
way for you to run away from being the victim of what those boys had did to you. And so I remember when I was talking to you the first time of saying, like, being a womanizer, you were trying to prove your manhood to yourself,
Mhm. And
because now I could get it, right? Now I can have these experiences that really your innocence was taken away from you
yeah,
back then. And so
because
you trying to
it
grapple.
wasn't about love. Oh, I'm sorry. It wasn't about love as a male at that time. It was more like with my ex-wife, of course, that was love. I loved her, she loved me. But with the other females, even though a lot of them were great people, I've had great times with them. But it really, when you think about it, wasn't about love. It was more like you tell your buddy, man, they'll be like, man, you was with a girl. I said, man, that was a girl. I'm kicking it to her. Or I'm kicking it to this girl. It was more of a man thing. It was like, yeah, I kicked it to a girl. Yeah, that was her or this girl. And so it wasn't, some type of love probably played a part in one or two of those relationships, but it wasn't like in love.
Yeah. Because it was you trying to get to know yourself, you trying to take back things that were taken from you, and that's you're not, how would you know that your greatness was in one woman when you hadn't had other women before, or when you were tired of feeling and being a victim? Because even when we think about that, again, you came into the relationship with things on your mind, you came into the relationship conditioned, so you were still thinking and being in that little boy's mind of try me again. You were still coming from that aspect
Yeah,
of self, and that just didn't come from, that wasn't just being satisfied by being in the gang, that was being satisfied by also having sex with women, because there's something going on in you, not that you felt like, not that you were questioning your sexuality, which I don't know if you ever did, but
no,
with that having something to do with it, of these men taking advantage of you, you are trying to prove to yourself, I'm good, I can get it, I can get a woman, I can get these females. So of course it had nothing to do with love. It was more so, I'm a man, and I
yeah.
want to feel like a man. I want to prove to myself that I'm a man, whether if it's through gangs, through getting into it with somebody, through having sex with women, because I am still trying to grapple with who I am and what has happened to me.
So that's part of like the grief process you talk about, right? Like that
Hmm.
grief that follows the
Yeah, grieving
shadow.
the part of you that you never had, but even grieving the part of you that grieving what you never had, but what you didn't even know.
Hmm.
But that's also that shadow aspect of it too, because it was following you.
Yeah.
You in the back of your mind, you were feeling guilty. In the back of your mind, you were feeling emasculated. In the back of your mind, you were feeling like I wasn't enough. In the back of your mind, you were feeling even still fearful.
Hmm.
I mean, that's a lot going on. And when a man is fearful or has um, a lot of things that are in opposition to him that he feels that he cannot control, he will go and go and control whatever he can, whether if it's sex, drugs, being in a gang, and knowing that you have the upper hand up on somebody, that you can control something,
Yeah.
you know. Um, so now you are in the relationship and you start having children. We're going through the process. Did your drug use start? When did your drug use start? Was it in the marriage?
Mm, marijuana, like, cause I never liked the liquor, so I never really drank liquor. Later on in years when we went to the clubs, I drank like screwdrivers, like
Hmm.
shots and stuff like that, just to get drunk. But I never liked it beer, so I didn't drink beer. The weed was it was joints, called joints back then. So I smoked sometimes joints with my buddy. That was the thing out there.
Yeah.
Um, but for some reason, weed will make me paranoid. I don't know why. So I levitated towards higher drugs, and I don't know why. But I know the older guy. There was a couple of the older guys from the gang. They were the ones bringing it to us younger dudes, like PCP,
Hmm.
and then some years later, a decade later, the heroin. But the PCP was what came in. I think once that came into my life, I want to say that I was already. That was probably maybe a few years later after me and my wife got together, got our apartment. So that was a few years later. But when I
Yeah.
started with her, I was doing the weed a little bit, but it was just getting me too paranoid. And
Yeah.
then maybe once I started hitting like 17 ish, not even too long after 18 was when the PCP started coming in on a sneak because we were supposed to smoke that.
Yeah.
But some of the older guys that were part of the gang, they were the ones bringing it to some of the younger dudes. I think that's what changed my thought because PCP changes your thought process a lot,
Yeah.
and yeah, and then so then years after that, maybe from 19, once the late 80s hit, when I'm already 20, heroin was introduced. Heroin was always there for the last few years, but I never wanted nothing to do with it. Didn't want to be around people that did it, but it was called brown. It
Mm.
was a different type of heroin. The people were shooting up. I didn't want, but then the powder China White is what it was called here in Chicago
Mm.
started hitting big on in the city, and I knew some of the guys were doing it, but for like 3 years they were doing it, and I would stay away from them. Like I'll give them a ride if they needed it, but I didn't want no part of it. And it just so happened a girl, someone that has my child, her brother at the time was really strong out on it.
Mhm.
And he used to always ask me, "Man, try it, try it." And I would never try it, but I
Yeah.
knew he wanted me to try it because he knew if I get addicted, I'm always going to treat him,
Yeah.
so it's going to work good for him. I just didn't want to, and the he one time he told me about it. I've heard it many times that the people say it's almost like the blue pill out here that people talk about on
Yeah.
commercials. Well, that was heroin back then, the China White.
Okay.
Everybody talked about, hey man, you do this, girls are gonna love you. You're gonna. I fell for that one time because he
Yeah.
told me, so, man, dude, and I fell for it. I took him and I tried it. I snorted a real small snort, not thinking it was, but it just so happened a week later, whatever, my back was really hurting,
Mm.
and I've always had back problems because of sports, but it was a different hurt. And he told me he knew what it was. He said, "Here, take a snort. Your pain is going to go away,"
Yeah.
which I did, and the pain completely left. But then it happened again a week later. So what I started noticing, not knowing back then, what that was the withdrawal.
Mm.
That's how
Oh,
I wind up, yeah, and that's how I wind up being addicted to heroin. At
okay.
the age of maybe 20. So I went through the age of 20, 21 to 30 when I got arrested of snorting
Yeah.
heroin.
And I
Yeah,
know when you were just talking about it, like, okay, I started smoking weed and then I ended up going to PCP and then I ended up going to heroin.
mhm.
Like, you would what because they used to use this a lot, like the gateway drug ordeal,
Yes,
right?
yes, like
And
weed.
I'm kind of biased about it because I know
Yes,
a lot of people who smoked weed or what have you and never did
yes,
anything else,
yes,
right? But I
100%.
think
Yes,
it's if you have an addictive personality, then you could go that route, right?
crazy. Yes,
Also, people who are escaping. And so when
that
you
was
were
me.
talking, you were just like, I don't know why I did it. Oh, you know why? Because
That
you
was
were
me.
escaping, you
Oh,
know?
100%.
And so it's like, and it was a perpetual thing with you as far as I'm going to escape through the gangs. I'm going to escape through the women. I can't run from my head. I can't run from my mind. I can't run from these thoughts. And so I need something that's either going to pick me up or put me down or whatever
Mhm.
it does to you so that you could be outside of yourself. Because in here, it was
Yes,
just crazy, right?
yes. Yeah, perfectly said. I'm glad you said it like that because escape is 100% part of it, 100%, if not the majority of it.
Yeah.
Um, because speaking of heroin itself, and I was snorting. I never shot up, thank God, but I was snorting, and it wasn't like this habit where I was wasting $100 a day. It
Mhm.
was basically if I buy a $10 or $20 bag, if it's good, I was good for the day or maybe for 2 days. You know, I
Yeah.
snorted, I'm good. But just because we were making money on the hustle, I would always buy more
Yeah.
to give away to some of the buddies and maybe snort more. Just
Yeah.
so it gave me this escape from everything that I was going through or thought of. It took me away from every single thing. It's crazy to the point that that's the one affair that I hated the most, but
Mm.
was too in love with to break up with. And I don't
Uh,
know if that makes sense, but that's how
Definitely,
it
it
felt.
does.
That's how it felt. Because I couldn't go nowhere without it. I couldn't go nowhere without it. We would take our kids to the movies while my wife was getting the kids ready. I would drive off to go get a bag.
Mm.
If we were going grocery shopping, I feel better with a bag because
Yeah.
it just made me the person that I thought I was supposed to be.
Yeah.
And then it just when I got addicted, it just became an escape because I wasn't. It was you weren't really getting high. It was just escaping from what you were.
Yeah.
Get the stick off and
And when you think about it too, back in the 90s, because this was in the 90s, right?
yeah, the ending of the '80s. Yeah,
Yeah. So going into those eras, like drugs was really starting to
yeah.
hit.
Oh yeah,
Drug dealers was really, they had already been,
yes.
of course, but during the 90s, I mean, things were coming down the pipeline and people were
Oh
trying
yeah,
PCP and
yeah,
putting the PCP with the weed and it was
yeah.
all this, so people were doing it, but I don't think that people really thought they were going to get hooked on it, you know?
No.
So then we go from the late 80s into the 90s and we have this stuff happening. Then you got crack
Yep,
cocaine that came through.
yep.
People started, there was the crack era. So it's like, again, a product of the environment and the things that
Mhm.
are being put into the environment to give you the ability to escape.
100%. Hmm. And it's
So it's like you were caught up not only on your own end, but just
well, even the '80s, in between the PCP, in between the weed, there was acid that I
mm,
went through some time taking. Again, coming from the older brothers, they have us sell it, but then they'll tell us, here, you take one, and then we'll take this much money off for what you
yeah.
sell. The same thing with there was this thing called Rush, which
Mm,
I haven't heard since, but it was a bottle, $100 bottle, and you take a whiff. It's like water, but you take a whiff of the bottle, and
hmm.
it just gives you a rush where you fall. And
Oh wow,
but
I've never
those were
heard of that one.
yeah, that's right. There was stuff crazy in between, and then once, like you said, once the '90s hit, was what we called the Maui's, which
Mm,
was experimenting. Guys would put the weed, they would put cocaine in
yeah,
it and roll it up, and I tried that, but I didn't like that because I was really getting paranoid with that.
yeah.
But it was almost a tryout from different drugs throughout those that decade, and then yeah, once the '90s hit, yeah, you said it. It
Yeah,
seems like everybody was a drug dealer.
yeah.
I mean, you
And,
had people.
that's where people started getting caught up too. Cause I think, in my side of the world, in Colorado, they used to call them primos. And that
That's
was
what, yes,
yeah, they were
primos.
primos.
Yes,
Um, and people, at first it was like, don't get high off of your own
on
supply,
supply. Of
but
course.
people were starting to, I don't know what it was, but they were, I really don't know. That's something that's very interesting. Maybe you can answer that question for me, but like when you see it, because you're selling it,
Yeah,
right?
you have
And then
some
you're
more.
seeing what it's doing to other people and you see that they
Yeah.
keep coming back and coming back. What is it that says, maybe I should try it too?
Well, for me personally, because I was always working like for a Connect, they
Mm-hmm.
didn't use the drugs I was using, so of course they have more money.
Mm-hmm.
And that was always the street code: don't get high off your supply,
Mm-hmm.
and you honor that. But it just seemed like for me having so much of it, like enough of it, where I can go get it. And I'm selling, customers are coming, and you got a buddy that's doing it. If you, it's like the old saying goes, also, you keep going to the barbershop, sooner or later you're gonna get a cut.
Yeah.
And I think for me and many guys fell into that aspect. The majority fell into that. Like you're around it so much that sooner or later you're talking in the back porch, or you are cruising together talking about things that both of you are going through, hurting.
Yeah.
And that becomes something that, you know what, let me get a little snort of that. Let me see how that
Because the escape.
Let's escape. That's
Yeah,
exactly
because
it.
the
It's a
escape,
state.
and you had somebody around you that made you feel safe to do it, right?
Uh-huh.
That wasn't going to judge you to do it. Because
Yes.
I'm pretty sure you probably weren't just going around doing it with everybody because you're
No.
you're, you're the man, right? You
Right. You
selling
have your own.
drugs, you don't want
Yeah. You
everybody to
have
know
your
that
group.
habit, right?
Yeah.
So
Yep.
now here we go. We're getting forced into this habit, and now we're on heroin, and we're kind of going down this road. So talk to me about because it stopped, like you said, you didn't have a choice but for it to stop when you hit prison,
Yeah.
but
Well, I
something
was in
happened
prison,
in
but
between.
yes.
So and something happened, like you said, the drugs, it changes your brain, it changes
Mhm.
the chemicals in your brain, right?
Mhm. It
And
changed.
so you had an experience, and I want you to tell us about the experience, but you were also high when you had the experience as well. So tell us about your first go around with trying to commit suicide.
There's been like three times that I always carried the ideation of suicide, I believe, from a young
Okay.
age, and I don't know where it came from. I don't know. I've told a couple people that it could have come, and I wouldn't be surprised if it came when I was a kid, when it was happening. Those things were happening to me. I don't see why it wouldn't come in my mind at that time. I used to literally sleep and escape to sleep or rest in the upstairs stairs in the hallway that goes all the way up to the roof. So I wouldn't be surprised if at times I thought of throwing myself off that roof.
Yeah.
You know, I just felt safe up there. But one of the first I remembered, which one of the critical ones for the book that made me want to write the book was I I want to say it was already I was already going through that PCP process through a few years already, and the affairs has gotten to me. I had one I got one girl pregnant already from one of the fairs, and I was still married. My marriage was breaking up, but my wife was she wanted to stay in the marriage. She loved me, and but I remember something was going on strong. Something was going on this one time that I knew that I was going to take my life. I knew everything was planned out. Everything was. It's the typical protocol of many that commit suicide. You know, you make a list, or some has a plan, some give away things. Well, I don't recall making a list, but I did start giving away important things that I love to people, to some of my buddies. Even if it was like some mixtapes, some of my favorite tapes, give them away. And I remember going to see my wife. She was pregnant, and I remember going to her, and we're talking to the back porch because we didn't talk for like 2 days because she knew I was with another woman, and so I went there in intention to tell her the truth that I had a baby from. She heard the rumors and she kind of was believing it,
Yeah.
but I was denied it. So what I was telling her, she began to cry, but like tears falling. But I think she seen something in me that she started thinking more of me because she
Mm,
knew me so good. She knew what I had in my mind because I was telling her I'll see you later, but she did not want me to leave. So
mm,
evidently I must have showed it some way
yeah.
somehow what my plan was, and but I told her I'm leaving and we'll talk later, but she didn't want me to leave. She was strongly saying, please don't go, we'll talk here. And I was like, no, I just want you to know I'm so sorry for what I did. And um so I wind up going to the back. I got in my car and I left, and I everything that I had planned in my mind, that's the route I took. I went down the alley, which is in our neighborhood, and I knew it so well because the neighborhood I knew completely well. From morning to night, I knew that neighborhood, so I knew no one was going to pass through that this time. It was a, it was by a hospital where there's no one in there, and so I went and I parked there with the intentions of taking my life. I was just going through too much that the drugs wasn't just taking the pain away no more. It wasn't a bandage. It was like making it worse. I was going through a lot of the guilt that I put my ex-wife, my wife at the time, and my kids. I was suffering of. It's just a lot of mental issues, and so I parked there, and I did. I pulled out a gun. And I did. That was my whole intentions. I even wind up putting a tape, a cassette with slow music. And it
Mm,
might not make sense to many, but to me, it made sense. To my sick mind, made sense at the time that if I put this soft music, It's going to put me more in the move. It's going to get my emotional stirring, and it's going to make me do it easier. And I close the door just a little bit enough where I can hear the music. And when I put the gun to my head, I was too nervous to do it. I was too afraid. So again, my sick thinking was to put the safety on the gun. And then I told myself, if I put the safety and I keep pressing it as hard as I press it, sooner or later it's going to go off. But I won't know when it's going off, so I won't be expecting it. I won't be as nervous. It just
Yeah.
happened. And I did. I kept pushing and pressing and nothing. And then all of a sudden, I just started thinking of my kids.
Yeah.
That moment when I started thinking of my kids, it all hit me. Like, what was I doing? Because I started thinking my kids, that's going to be the last memory of their dad in this
Yeah.
alley. So I quickly put the gun down. But the ironic thing is, when I put the gun down, the bullet shot or the gun shot off.
Mm.
And that was probably God telling me, you're worth more than this.
Yeah.
But it did. It went off, and I quickly checked. Nobody heard nothing. Nobody was around. I got in my car and I left. And it just became the following day. I don't even think I thought about it much no more. I definitely didn't tell nobody about it. I just continued life like
Yeah.
nothing. But the
And
pain.
what you had mentioned too is that that building that you went to, wasn't that one of the buildings that you were abused in?
Well, the one that I went used to go in the fourth floor to the roof,
Mm-hmm.
which was from the first neighborhood. Yes, there was a time when I remember because I thought my thing outside as a little boy, I used to always try to escape. Like I would see Vicito and maybe
Yeah.
try to if they don't see me, then I can go this way. One time, I went through the. We lived in the first floor in the front, so there's people lived in the back. We lived in the front. There's eight apartments, four, and I come through the back to go in through the back, and I remember the door locking without me turning around. I already knew. It just something in me knew somebody followed me, and I knew who it was. It was. I didn't turn around. I just knew, and I knew it was going to happen, and it did, and it did. So yeah, that alley or that hallway. There were times that I will go to the top floor, and I would get in a fetal position and sleep, or just lay down. It was so dark, and I'm alone up there. I felt safe up there. But there used to be rats that would run over me, and I didn't know they were rats until one time when I felt something, and I woke up a little bit out my little cozy in there, and it was like, but it didn't get me scared. I wasn't afraid of the rats, which is crazy to say. But that hallway, yes, that is one of the hallways.
Yeah.
The alley part, though, it was from the new neighborhood, Homo Park, which I knew the whole neighborhood, so I knew who'd be around. But the ironic thing on that alley, if I would have took my life there, today they built a thing for the army base or army people can live at. So you don't see the alley go all the way to past the boulevard. But back then, this same alley would take you past the boulevard 2 blocks, and right in the same alley 2 blocks away, that was our first apartment. Me,
Oh.
my wife, and my kid. So even that would have been more devastating because my kids can look out one day, think of the old apartment, and I'm laying, a couple
Yeah.
down.
Yeah. And so you bypassed that. You were, that was a saving grace right
Yeah,
there,
it
right?
was.
And
Yeah,
we also talked about, how some people who have decided that they're going to go ahead and take their lives, they don't, just thinking about their children doesn't click them into
no,
deciding not to do it, right? But your children were your saving grace
yeah,
during that time
oh
because
yeah,
you thought about them and you were
yeah,
like, okay, it's better that I'm here than I'm not here. So it
yeah,
was like, a lot of the times, and I'll say this because I think that suicide can be a very selfish thing, especially when you have people who are
and
there for you, who love you.
mhm,
You know what I mean?
mhm,
And I do understand why some people have done it, especially people who didn't have anybody, who were just alone and, all of those things. So I understand both sides of the
yeah,
spectrum. But you not doing it was a selfless act because you put your kids before you put your own disdain for self,
yeah.
right?
It is.
Um, yeah. So with that, we start moving on. And how long from that period to you going into prison?
Oh, so let's say 90, about 9 years later.
Okay.
Yeah, I already had left the gang life. I left the gang life. I still like associated with some of the guys. If I go by the block, I'll stop. Hey, how you doing? And they knew me. It was a new generation now, so they were running their generation now. But I left all that alone. I actually was working for a youth program, helping kids or youth. But then in '99, which was about 9 years later, around there, '99 happens. I just turned 30, and I was still into the heroin. I was still snorting heroin. I was addicted to the heroin. Even when I worked, I still was into heroin. But yeah, '99 comes. I just started a new job, Allstate Insurance, which was almost like 45 minutes away from Chicago from us. So I didn't have my car at that time. So I would take like one bus all the way. Then I'll take the train. Then I take two pace buses. And I was there 2 weeks. The second week when I got home, detectives came to the house I had just walked in the house, not even 5 minutes earlier than that. I walked in and I go down. My grandmother asked me if I wanted something to eat. I was hungry and I remembered. I was like, "See, ma," I told her in Spanish, "See, mommy, I'm gonna go downstairs first to get my clothes." And so she was making me the food, but then I hear her voice call me downstairs that the detectives want to speak to me, and that's when your heart's always gonna fall anytime the police want to talk to you because you're so accustomed to things happening on the block. They arrest
Right.
you for little things, and so getting bothered by them. But I knew I didn't do nothing. I was like, why they come to my house?
Yeah.
I went upstairs. I'm like, what do you guys want? And yeah, they would question me that if I want to go to the station because they just have a couple questions for me. And I didn't. I said, nah, you ask me here.
Yeah.
They didn't want to. And my grandmother, she had a triple bypass prior to that, and so she was getting real nervous sitting on. It was me and then her and my two nieces that were newborns. So I could see my grandmother's tears starting to fall because I was her baby. So she passed away, I was always her baby. My mom was in the kitchen. She never even knew what was going on. She was cooking in the kitchen.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, but I told the detective when I seen my grandmother started crying, getting nervous. I told the detective, man, let's go, man, let's go. See, my grandmother's gonna get a heart attack because of you, man. And yeah, so they walked me out, and my sister lived in the upstairs apartment. She came down quick. She heard some commotion, and as soon as she seen them grabbing me, taking me out, she just went berserk. She just started, "What the f are you doing to my brother? Leave him alone. I'm tired of you guys come. Do you got a f warrant?" And I'm telling her they don't have a warrant. They don't have nothing. They just come in, and she was like, "I'm tired of this. Leave him alone." I just wanted to get out the front door
Yeah.
because I don't want my grandmother to have a heart attack. So they took me in the car. They read my rights, but they didn't tell me what I was arrested for. I still didn't have an idea. They asked me a couple questions come walking to the car if I worked. First, they asked me if I had a girlfriend. I explained to them I'm divorced. Me and my wife are separated. And
Yeah.
then you got a job. And as soon as I say, yeah, I work at, before I even finished saying what I work at, he was like, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. So I told him, you know what? You want to be sarcastic? You ask me a question. You don't let me answer. Don't ask me nothing else no more.
Yeah.
That was it. They put me in the car. They read my rights. And I still had no idea what I was arrested for. About an hour later, my sister-in-law had called the attorney. He came to the district, and he's the one that told me. He said, "Listen, we have it was like 16 counts of attempt murder, residential burglary, home invasion," and my brain was just going, "You're crazy. How can
Yeah.
you're crazy?" And when asked him when did this happen, he told me the date, which was the Tuesday prior. I told him, "Go to my job tomorrow morning, get the paper. It's going to show I was at work." So I was really happy. I knew my proof is there, so I was
Yeah.
happy. I was in a police station, nothing new. In a police station, I'll be out. It's happened before, but what was different about this time? They took me to another room and they cuffed me up. After my attorney, I heard my attorney tell him, "Don't ask me questions." When he was leaving, he told them that I want nobody to ask me questions unless he's present, and they broke that quick. But they cuffed me, and when they locked that door, I could still hear because the bottom door had a little, like a real little,
Well, crack.
yeah, like a crack. And I remember the lady detective was like telling people, "Hey, put your best clothes on, put your best suit on. The news is downstairs." So I realized then that it's bigger than just a regular case. This is on
Yeah.
the news. I didn't see it. My family seen it. It just wound up being an attempt murder. It was a girl, and the guy that lives in building, said that it was me. I never seen them. I never seen them people. The first time I seen them physically in my life was 3 years later in trial, because I stood 3 years in Cook County Jail fighting a case, and I didn't see them until trial, and it was the first time. And even then, sometimes you won't. I started making myself think, did I ever cross paths with them? Maybe in a store,
Yeah.
maybe, and nothing. It was all blank. I've never seen those people. So um, it was a horrible crime. The way it was described, it was horrible. To the point that even when I was found, when I got convicted, the judge asked me if I want to say something before my sentence, and I did. I explained to the judge, I cannot stand here and apologize for something I didn't do, Your Honor. So I did not commit this crime, and yeah, they wind up giving me the 20 years and 10 at 85%. So I did the 18 years. Um, and when I came out, I wind up getting in contact with a firm here that they fight for wrongful conviction. These lawyers, that's what they do, and that's their whole concept. And they took my case, and once they took my case, they just started seeing this wasn't you. It's obvious this wasn't you. And my attorney, and then he brought in another attorney, which she's also awesome. They're great. And and through the grace of God, I guess I can't say much about it because it's still ongoing. But what I
Right.
could say is through the grace of God that this judge that we have, she's what I ask for in my prayers. Someone that's a
Mhm.
legal judge, someone that's honest and will look at both sides, the prosecutor and the defense, and
Yeah.
then decide, you know. So, she did just grant us for evidentiary hearing that we're preparing for,
Yeah.
which is something that we dreamed about. You dream about that you just want to prove your innocence. You want to get in front of a judge and allow to have your evidence with you. So we're
Yeah.
at that point. In my heart, I do believe for the first time that my innocence is going to get proved. I think my attorneys are doing a phenomenal job. They're really fighting, and they're showing. So yeah, the
Yeah.
evidence is there. The evidence is there.
And so you're hopeful. You
Very,
have hope in that.
very.
And while you were in prison, your two main people ended up
Mm.
passing away. And
Yeah, my grandparents.
yeah, and I want you to tell us about that, but even not but tell us about that and the support or lack thereof of support that you didn't have while you were in prison when it came to grief in prison.
Oh wow! Do you know the funny thing about uh, being in prison is when someone says I'm blessed, because it's almost oxymoron. How can you be blessed in prison?
Yeah,
But I was blessed to have a family that stood with me throughout all those years, and they will visit when they can, which was hard. I was away. The first prison I went through for some years was 6 hours away,
okay.
going and 6 hours coming. Then my second prison did like 13 years there. That was 4 hours going and 4 hours coming. So it was never easy for my family. And then it became a time once the 2000, the late 90s, the 2000s hit, that was when the money wasn't there, like the 80s. And,
Yeah,
all my family works, but they had family of their own and kids, and they had to take care of their bills and their
yeah,
car loans. And so, but they were there all my life. The grief came with the fact that when you're in there, not that you expect more, but that you hope more. That sometimes you don't get a visit. You might get 5 visits a year, which is great because some people don't get none.
yeah.
So I was blessed, but there was some people, like certain family members, that maybe I took it out more on them because
Mm,
maybe because they didn't write me more.
yeah,
Maybe they only wrote me once a year, and I would be like, man, you can't write me a letter.
yeah,
So selfishly, and it's sad, but I did get the love from out here because the letters that did came in and the phone calls, that helped me so much.
yeah.
In prison, though, it's almost impossible to get help for grief. Like mental health in there, it's rampant, and there's
Mm,
no training for that. So in prison is the one place you're surrounded by 1,000 plus people, but you feel like you're the only person in the world.
okay.
You can't grieve in prison. That's a no-no when you go to prison. You can't grieve.
Yeah.
You try to hold any shed tear that you want to come out. You try to hold that in. You don't want to tear because you don't want to feel weak. You don't want to seem
Right.
weak to nobody. Because the truth of the matter is, there's great people I met in prison. I mean, there's guys that I met in there that are great guys.
Yeah.
People that to this day out here that I love. If they call me to go over there, I have no problem. I have
Yeah.
no problem inviting them to family picnics because they're great men. They made a
Yeah.
mistake and whatnot, but for the most part, it's a cesspool. It's sharks, and the
Yeah.
sharks that are looking for the ones that are weak. And I've never, because of the gang life, going into prison for the first time in my life, I wasn't scared. Because it wasn't new to me. Because I had many guys that did many years, so it wasn't new, even though it was my first time.
Yeah.
But the grief process, there's nowhere to grieve.
Yeah.
So in there, I don't think I even. I mean, you pray to God and you let God work in your heart. That was my comfort and my writing. My
Yeah.
writing was a big escape for me in there.
Yeah, and that was sound like it was like your saving grace because
Oh
when your
yes.
grandmother passed away, I mean, how were you going to process that?
Well, my family kind of prepared me for it because she was going through health issues. She's got Alzheimer's, and then she was getting worse and worse. She wanted to move. Then my sister had to move in, brought her to live with her, and but the beauty of it was, even in her Alzheimer's stage, when I talked to her maybe 2 times a year, maybe 3 times a year through the phone, she remembered. Sometimes she'll tell me, "Son, are you coming yet? Are you by the store yet?" And I would just say, "Yeah, I'm just getting the milk. I'll be," and
Yeah.
she'll tell me that like 2 or 3 times. "Oh, son, did you forget the milk? Are you still by the store?" And I said, "Oh yeah, mommy, I'm grabbing it right now." But she will remember me. She knew who I
Yeah.
was, and she called me by my name, and so that felt good. But when she was the last week she was dying, I remember that my sisters and my mom were telling me that the doctor's so dumb to let me know that you know she's going to pass away, and maybe it's best for me to try to make it easier for her because you never want your loved one to pass selfishly. You want
Yeah.
it. So I never forget my last phone call with her, which was in the day room, which everybody can see. So there's two phones that are just hanging on the wall with no box, and then there's two phones that has like a little box where you can hide it, like put your head in the box.
Yeah.
I grabbed one of those because I knew it was going to be emotional. And I remember the half hour talking to her. I was trying to not to sniff loud enough and cry, and I was trying to, because I was explaining to her it's okay. It's okay to go. That I was okay, and I would always tell her I gained weight because I was a skinny kid. I was always skinny. She would ask me, "Hijo, comite?" Or "Son, did you eat?" And I would always tell her, "Yeah, I'm gaining weight." And I try to make her mind feel good. And then I
Yeah.
told her, "Mommy, it's okay, mommy, go." And
Yeah.
yeah, that was the last time, and it was one of the worst times in my life in there or out here. Because again, I couldn't grieve.
Yeah.
There was nowhere to grieve. I couldn't even go to a corner and scream. There's nowhere where there's free. I do remember the counselor, the officer. I guess my sister called the counselor,
Hmm.
and they knew I was going to go through some bad times. And the counselor called me into his office, and my daughter, waiting for the call, he said, "There's somebody going to call you," and it was my daughter, Marisol. And
Okay.
she called and she was crying, "Dad, are you okay? Are you okay?" And my daughter, Marisol, especially her, she's a very, very strong, even at that age, at the age she was probably, I don't know, 17, 18,
Yeah.
but she has this thing in her. She's extremely strong. She
Yeah.
tries to hold herself emotionally, not, and she was crying and she was telling me, "Please, Dad, are you okay?" "Yeah, yeah, I'm good. I'm good." So even Officer Babs, I'll never forget his name. He wound up becoming a sergeant, but he was a good, good officer, a man that just came and did his job. He actually wound up going to my cell knowing the pain. And he told me, "Man, if you have to use the phone call, even though it's not your day room,
Yeah.
I'll open the door for you. I'll get you a car." And I was like, "I'm good, man, I'm good." And he told me, I'll let you out today for the day room with the top day. And I'm good. Thank you. But I appreciated that, because that helped a little bit ease a little bit of the, because somebody cared,
Yeah.
and it's
Just
good
to
that
be
somebody,
validated in that moment, to be recognized in that moment.
yes.
Yeah.
And I wasn't allowed. I was given a in prison a choice. Do you want to go to see her in her last days in the hospital, like one moment with her, maybe 20 minutes, or do you want to see her in the funeral? And it was such a decision. How do you make that decision? You want to see her, but then you don't want to see her like that last. Then you want to see her, you want to see her in a casket. You don't want. It was like, it was such a bad decision, and I wind up choosing the latter. Um, I said, I'll see that. I know prisons, when they allow you to go visit somebody in the funeral, they go, but they have to first contact the the funeral home.
Yeah.
Then no one can be there. They take you maybe like at 6:30, 7 in the morning, shackled up with two officers by yourself. There's better. They can't nobody be in the funeral. They can't nobody be outside. You see her for about 10 minutes, shackled up. They rush you right out back to prison. So my family told the prison that they want to take me to see her, and so it was like, I don't know, $7,000 I think, because we have to pay for the security too. That has to come out of our money, not their budget.
Mm,
So
okay.
my family was getting money together to let me go to visit her. But unfortunately, the day came and gone, and when I got the opportunity to talk to this new counselor like a few days later, yeah, she gave me the whole, the whole junk spill. Oh, with a Springfield, with Springfield here is the head of the
Mm,
of Illinois, that they denied me. But she didn't give me no reason why. Even though after everything was okay, punched okay, she didn't give me no reason. She didn't give me no reason why nobody came and told me.
yeah. So you didn't get to go to the funeral.
No, her or my grandfather. No.
Did they give you your money back?
Well, they didn't. It wasn't paid for yet.
Okay.
It wasn't paid for until you're finally the day. I guess the day before, whatever, when everything's fixed. Then, because prison is one thing that everything has to be done at a moment, but set up by the prison,
Yeah.
that not even the family would know, or and they're out warned. You get warned if anybody's near the funeral, we're taking them back and we're not
Yeah.
bringing them back to the funeral. So everything
Mm,
was set up, but no, I think there was a buddy of mine from the same gang that we grew up together. He was my neighbor, so we are real close. He happened to be in the same joint with me at that time. He was there for 4 years, so here he was to 3 years. Well, at this time, he was on the same deck. He just was on the top day room. So at this time, when I made the phone call, my bottom deck, where I was on, was out on the day room.
yeah.
So I went upstairs to tell him through his door, about, because he was close to my grandmother. And my grandmother treated him like a son too, because he was a neighbor. So yeah, he was shocked, but it brought. That's the only comfort that I can say we had, that I had someone that from out there that we knew. Other than that,
Yeah.
even the visits, I love visits, but at that time, during that time, even the visits, when I'm waiting for when I knew I was getting a visit from my family or loved ones, I kind of cringed them because I knew it was going to be so emotional
Yeah.
out in the visiting room about my grandmother, and I kind of wanted to stay away from that, but I couldn't.
Yeah. Yeah. So you had to give yourself a lot of permission to
No.
to feel what you were feeling, but control it and to
Oh yeah,
manage it. So that makes me want to ask you, now that you've been out, because you've been out for how long?
7 years. Yeah, a
Okay.
little over
So
7 years, 2 months.
so you've been out for 7 years. Have you taken the time to properly grieve your grandparents?
Ooh, it's still emotional to this day when I think of my grandparents, and I
Yeah.
hold myself from getting emotional, but it's there. And it took me over a year, probably maybe close to 2 years, to go visit them at the burial.
Yeah.
I just couldn't. And to this day, I've went a few times, but I want to go more. But it's still the same feeling.
Yeah.
I wanted to go there with my book to sit with it, because I always told them as a kid I liked the writing, and my grandmother would see me, and so I wanted to take the book to sit there with them
Yeah.
and just enjoy with them. But no, I don't think the grieving stopped. No, it hasn't stopped. Because I don't. I just
Well,
feel
it's
too.
not going to stop. It's
Yeah.
not going to stop. But, you were in a prison, literally, literally and emotionally,
Yeah.
psychologically, where you couldn't feel it. Like you could feel
Yeah.
it, but you had to keep it all in, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
so now that you're free, so to speak, taking that time to allow yourself to feel it and allow yourself to act it out or to feel it out, so to speak, because you're going to feel it, but you're going to
Yeah.
feel it out. And so I
Yeah.
think that a lot of times, I think that it would be beneficial for you to go and sit with them with your book and cry it out,
Yeah,
and just let it be, because that's a lot of pinned up emotion that you have. That is another that's now a part of your shadow too. That builds up a little bit of that resentment even towards life, that resent and making you feel guilty for the decisions that you made, and even
yeah,
resentment towards what caused you to be in such a shell, when you're like, I didn't even do this.
yeah,
I didn't do this. It was not my actions. And so all this time that I missed out on my grandmother, all this time that I feel like I have disappointed her, that I did this and that
mhm,
I've done that. Now, in her resting in
yeah,
her peace, right? You can go to her and you
mhm,
can talk to her and you can apologize and you can just have those
mhm,
moments, because people, when you lose people, you are trying to hold on to what was there before,
yeah,
that relationship that was there before. But people very seldom are able to build new relationships with their lost loved ones. And that has to be one of the most important things that you could do, is to, now I can't have you in this tangible way. But now let's figure out how I can integrate you in my life now that
mhm,
we are in this new space together. And I think that that would be really beneficial for you, and a lot of release, and even more freeing for you if you were to do it that
yeah,
way. And sharing
yeah,
your book, you know
yeah,
you overcame it. Just think
mhm,
how painful it would have been for your grandmother, even if
mhm.
you would have taken your
Oh,
life at that time.
oh my God, I don't think she would have lived another day after that.
Yeah,
I really don't. And it's true, that's selfishness.
yeah,
Because the selfishness was of me wanting to leave, not thinking of everybody else.
yeah,
Because at that time, sometimes I used to feel better if I wasn't here.
yeah,
That I would think maybe now my family don't got to suffer me using drugs, or me, my wife at the time, me wasting the rent money on drugs, or whatever I was doing, she wouldn't have to go through that no more.
yeah,
And that guilt took some years, because I've told people this many times. It wasn't easy when I got incarcerated. Me and my ex-wife were already separated over a year. She was already dating, and I already had dated. I had an ex-girlfriend at the time,
yeah,
so it wasn't easy. I was still in love with her. I believe I loved her. So it took years until one day I had like 7 years left. And that's when I started telling God, maybe 6 years left. I started telling him, I'm going to need you, God, to take the love from me. Because I already realized that my wife wasn't coming back.
yeah,
She already had her new life. And I needed God to take that love away. And he did. As years passed, he did. I always wish her the best, but I had this guilt to all the way to me going home. When I was about a year short of going home, I used to tell the guys in there, I'm ready. I'm prepared. Because I was lucky to have, throughout those years, I still had like certain females that I would I was dating, and they
hmm,
would visit. I had a few that were very loyal. They would visit for 2, 3 years, send me money on the phone all the time, letters. So that helped me through all that.
yeah,
But I used to tell guys when I was a year short, when I get out, I'm to the point now that I guess love won't be there no more. It's just going to be about me kicking it with females, kicking it with this girl. And I was already prepared for that. I was
preparing yourself.
like,
Yeah,
yeah. So I got lucky to meet my now fiance, because she checked all the boxes. I
yeah,
checked all those little boxes that I was hoped for, but I didn't think I have, or didn't believe I deserved, to be more fair. I just didn't think that from the way I destroyed one marriage, who am I to have a second chance? But
yeah,
it was a blessing that I have her, and it's understanding. And I've told her everything that I went through. I told her about my drug use, about the suicide attempts, my ex marriage, because I didn't want to leave her in the dark. I wanted people to know who I am, and then you have the opportunity. Even with my wrongful conviction, when we started getting serious, I gave her my transcripts, and I
yeah,
told her, "You take this home, and you read it, and if you feel for 1 second that I'm guilty, you don't have to say a word to me. You can
yeah,
leave me. You don't owe me no apologies, and I respect that."
yeah,
But she gave it back, and she told me she didn't even. She gave it to me right in the car back, and she said, "I don't need that. I know it wasn't you." And
Yeah.
And so it shows me that she believes what I'm telling her. It's not, because the hardest thing for I've always told people the hardest thing for an innocent man to do is prove his innocence. It
Yeah.
really is. It really is. And and everybody that says they're innocent might not be innocent, but they're not all guilty either. I
Yeah.
mean, this is wrongful conviction is huge in the United States and around the world.
Yeah. And especially for people of color,
Yeah.
that's a whole nother aspect that
Yes.
we can go down a rabbit hole with. But, and especially from back then and
Hmm.
even prior to then, because they
Hmm.
don't have the
Oh
technology that they have
no,
today, the
that's
way that
right.
they were running DNA, the way that they
That's
were,
right.
all of these things. So yeah, wrongful conviction is definitely a thing. And
Mhm.
especially the way that you were saying that it was on the news. So they needed to wrap up a case. They needed
Yeah, they
to,
need it.
they needed to have some answers, you
And
know?
and and it's cases like this, like in my case, the 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 conviction came on solely on the eyewitness, the neighbor, and the victim said it was me. That's it on eyewitness identification. But it's about a 70+ percentage of convictions of wrongful convictions are identification, because identification cases is just not what people think. And again, I don't blame the victim.
Yeah.
I'm not here to say that the victim meant to put the wrong person in. I think she went through a horrible crime that
Yeah.
I can't even imagine. So I don't blame the victim. I just think I was caught in a situation where someone has to get locked up. Someone's going to pay for it, and it just happened to be me.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. But again, we go into that purpose, right?
yeah.
And that the horrible things that happen in the world, the unfair things that happen in the world that happen to people. And
Hmm.
you had so many of those instances that now you get to come out on the other side and you get to make peace with it, not get over it, not just, oh, you're healed, but you can find you 7 years, you've been out 7 years.
Yeah.
7 years you've had to go through the processing of making peace with a lot of things,
Yeah. And still.
and you're still making peace with a lot of things. It's a
Hmm.
continual process, right? And so now you get to come out on the other side and you get to do your part. You get to do those things that you feel that the gang life took away from you, or that just being in the streets or the drugs took away from you, because you were taking things for granted at that time.
Yeah.
You were probably wreaking a little havoc at the time. You didn't do that
Hmm.
crime, but it
Hmm.
was like I was living in the streets. I was in a
Yeah.
gang. I was, being unfaithful to my wife, like all of these things. So when you say, like, I get a second chance, I didn't think I was going to get a second chance. You really
Hmm.
are the epitome of second chances.
Wow.
You got out and you were able to find a wonderful fiance that accepts you, that loves you, that,
Hmm.
that's there, it supports you. And you have written a book. You have, you're getting interviews, you're getting called back to prison
Yeah.
to teach people, to talk to people. And so everyone has their journey, right? We
Hmm.
just don't know what it's going to be, but your journey is led you into your purpose.
Yeah. Yeah. 100% correct. Yeah.
And you get to do something with it, and you get to show up. You get to show up out of the aspect of being that man that you were so trying so hard to identify with, that man that you knew that was in you, that people kept on taking advantage of, that people kept trying to strip you of your identity. Now you've come
Mhm.
into your identity. Who am I am Angel. I am, this is who I am. So now you have a true identity of, you could show up. You could show up and give it all you got, right?
That's right. And again, you hit it with identity, because remember earlier we said that my real name was never used. Once I got into gangs, it was a whole different nickname.
Yeah.
No one ever even called me like Angel was never used. I have a family name which is Bobby, and that's for my family. Gave me that since a little
Mhm.
kid. So nobody ever used that other than my family and one or two friends, close friends that I grew up with. But my nickname from the street was always used. That was the main my name. In county jail for this time, we started using. I knew my life had to change. I knew even though I was wrongful convicted, I told myself I'm going to use that, take advantage of learning everything I can, and to heal myself. So I started using Angel for the
Yeah.
first time in my life, really, other than when I was a kid in school. And from then on, I'm only called Angel. I
Yeah.
never even that image was never even in my mind as being the name, my name Angel. I didn't even like my name at first as a kid. But that's how everybody knows me now. It's by the real image.
And then I want to look up, have you ever looked at the meaning of your name?
Other than I did because I had a Bible and the back of it has different, and I did, but oh God, I wish I remember. Other than the spiritual being, um, but I know there's more to it. And my son's a junior, and then his son, my grandson's also named Angel. My
Yeah.
dad's name's Angel, but he's got a middle initial, so that's why he's. I don't think I'm. I think I'm the first, other than
Yeah.
a junior.
And so when I look up your name, it says
Mhm.
a spiritual being believed to act as an attendant, agent, or messenger of God,
Yeah,
conventionally represented in human form with wings and a long robe. And that's just conventional. That's just, of course, how
yeah,
people would like to think of angels
mhm,
looking.
yeah.
But when you think about your name and you're putting all these pieces together, and it's like sometimes you could believe that it feels like you were put on the earth as a martyr, put on the earth as, someone that is enduring all of this. And these people not knowing who they were entertaining, who they
Uh,
were abusing, who they were, what have you.
wow,
And
yeah,
it's like, your name goes with who you are. You are Angel. You are, now you get to live up to that name. You get
mhm,
to, because that's always been your identity, right?
yes,
And
yes,
so now, my name is Angel. And what does Angel do? I'm going to go and I'm going to
mhm,
show up for these people. I'm going to go show up for these kids that need me, because I may be the angel that God has sent, the
and
messenger
yeah,
that God has sent in order to save these kids, save the
mhm,
people that cross my path. And that's why I say, and I, sometimes I cringe at the analogy too, that everything happens for a reason, but everything happens according to purpose,
yes, yes,
you know?
awesome. That's exactly correct.
Yeah. So, I mean, as much as the things have happened to you, I want you to go into the rest of your life being proud of yourself, and go sit down and hang out with your grandparents
Mhm,
and tell them, I'm still
mhm,
here. I
yeah,
made it. I'm okay.
yes,
And that's the part that gave me chills. But
mhm,
that's the part that is more important, because they, even though they're dead and gone, and physically, they
mhm,
still go around. They still see what's going on. They still feel the hurt that you feel. They know what's going on. But as long as they know that you're settled now in yourself, peaceful
mhm.
within yourself, can sit
That's
down and have that conversation with them as an adult, as a man that has came through,
mhm. And
that's all
that's
they
all they.
can ask for.
Yeah, that's all they ever wanted. They were two human beings that never cared about nothing else other than you treat people right. If someone's hungry, you feed them. They didn't care if we became a doctor or a lawyer. Like my grandfather would teach us, and from his walk, no matter what job we had, as long as we do it 100% for who's paying, for the boss. And that's how I taught my sons. I said, whatever where you work, even if it's a janitor, but do the best you can as a janitor.
Yeah,
Don't cheat out your. So that I know my grandparents, even if they were alive today, I know they would have been. Sometimes I wish that they would have, like out here, I would have done it
yeah,
prior to they passing away, that they would have seen my life changing. But I think they seen changes when I was in prison, when we conversated through my letters. They seen the new me
yeah.
in that aspect.
Yeah. And
So
the thing is too with that, I'm glad you mentioned that, because even the letters that you were writing,
Mhm.
you got out and you still maintained it. Like
Yeah,
there was a growth. So you
yeah,
know how people are like, that's prison talk. I'm talking
yes,
all good. I'm all about God. I'm all about Allah. I have changed
mhm,
my life for the better. And then you get
yes,
out and you're the same person that you were when you
mhm,
left, right?
yes,
But it seems that you got out and you utilized what you learned.
mhm,
Now you're intentional
yeah,
about how you're living.
yes,
You said, this is the man that I want to be, and I'm gonna come out and I'm gonna be that man. And it seems as if that's what you've been living out.
yes.
And
Total opposite
that's
of
good.
before. Yeah,
Hmm.
that's total opposite of before, of all the guilt and pain, and I couldn't. Like, you said it a few times. Identical identity. I Back then it was completely like couldn't even explain it. Like I felt like garbage. I didn't even feel like a human being. I just So it's total opposite of the
Yeah.
person I was back.
And you took your power back.
Mhm.
Everything that you were running from, everything that was chasing you, because we don't want to say you were running from it because you were scared. Everything that was chasing you that
Mhm.
made you run, now you've
Yeah.
turned around and you're able to stand on all 10 toes and you took your power back.
Yes.
How, I mean, that's a lot for you to pat yourself on the back and be proud for, Angel. Literally,
Thank you. Thank you.
literally. So now we are engaged, and tell us what we can look forward to seeing from Angel.
For me right now, I'm actually working on a book, but it's a novel. It's a
Okay.
fiction. So I was speaking to a publicist. She owns her own publishing company, and she had talked to me, and I haven't spoken to her in a couple months. But she had told me that she would like to take me on if I would like to do a 3 book part, a trilogy.
Mm,
I've never done that. I feel more. It seems more easy to write it when it's coming like memoirs and stuff.
yeah.
But I did mess around with fiction novels, short stories when I was in prison. I would type up, not publish, but type them up and send them to my mom. She loves reading it. So right now, due to the fact that my case is still open, my attorney's advice is better not to write nothing. Because I wanted to write a book first on a memoir on the wrongful conviction.
Yeah.
But he said sometimes that the state tries to use that stuff to
Mm,
twist it. And
yeah.
I respect that. I respect my lawyers. So I'm actually started writing a novel on which I'm trying to make it the trilogy, but it's going to have parts of wrongful. It's a fiction, but the character in it, the main character, is going to be a wrongful convicted. So right now I'm in the process of I'm writing on the perspective of the detective
Okay.
in the in the and so right now that's what I'm working on now. Um, as far as I'm still an artist, I still enjoy my art, and sometimes when I do get orders, it's good. It helps, and I continue my writing. Like I said, I think a door is opening. Like I mentioned earlier to you off the camera, that I was contacted by a prison
Yeah.
that I was last in, and they want to know if I didn't mind to go speak to the inmates, and it's something I've always wanted to do. But then
Yeah.
when I contacted another prison a couple of years ago, it was almost like they were like weeding you out. It wasn't like
Yeah.
they want that to happen. So for this to just fall in my lap, and I agreed on it. They told me to write them a proposal. I send it to them. So now, you know, they do their part, and then they'll do my background check and all that. And so if that opens more doors, that's 100% I want to do, because even though I'd never want to go back into prison, even to visit,
Yeah.
but if I can say something that can help some guys in there, 100% I'll continue that anytime they need. And this summer or this spring and summer, this new season coming up, I've been wanting to do a mural for 2 years about the youth that we lost here in Illinois, gun violence. We had kids that got killed and throughout the whole city. And I've come up with an example already. I got the image. I did the painting. And I gave it for the last 2 years. Me and my fiance is going to pay for everything, the paint, everything. We're gonna, but we can't find a wall. I can't get a wall. I've talked to to politicians. I've talked to some people that own businesses, and it just seems almost impossible. But this year, again, it's going to be my main goal to find a wall. So the ending of last year, what I came up with, I went to Home Depot, so I'm getting these big boards. It's wood, but where it can be good for the weather. I'm getting 4 of those, and I'm going to do the mural on that, and then
Okay.
I'm going to send it to businesses. That way, we could just put screw the boards on the walls instead of their wall.
Okay.
So I want that, and I want to continue hoping to get some speaking engagements because I am a speaker. I just haven't had the engagements to get on them,
Yeah.
and appreciative of you for giving me this opportunity. And I'm trying to get on a TED Talk, so I've been contacting them and ways to get on.
Good.
So yeah, I try to stay busy. I'm still like you mentioned before. I'm still kind of closed in at home. I feel more safe at home.
Yeah.
So if I don't have anywhere to go, I'll stay home. I feel
Yeah.
safe at home.
Yeah. And it's just that aspect of putting yourself out there in the right places, right?
Right? Yeah.
And for the right in the right places and for the right people who need you.
100%.
Because
Yes.
it's okay for you to be cautious now. It's okay for you to, and not even be cautious because now you're, like you said, you're 56. What do you
Yes.
have to do out there?
Right.
If it doesn't have anything to do with your kids and your grandkids and your
Mhm.
family or your wife or your business or what have you, there's nothing out there.
There's nothing. Right.
Find you something. You have so many hobbies, and not even hobbies. It's gifts that you have,
Yeah.
right? And
Hmm.
so figuring out how to turn those gifts into monetary value, turning
Yeah.
those gifts into making sure that you're reaching the people that you're supposed to
Hmm.
reach. And
Hmm.
so, I mean, you're no longer, if you're saying that in the aspect of still feeling like imprisoned
Hmm.
because I'm used to being in prison, I'm used to being in this confined space, and even after 7 years, I still feel better being in a confined space because that's my
Yeah. Not.
safety.
I think just safer a little bit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and so still feeling like that, but now it's you can slowly start coming out because you're doing the right things. You're not out there
Yes.
doing nothing crazy, right?
Yes. Hmm.
And again, it's all purpose. It's all purpose, but also too wanting to remind you. And I love how it came about. Like you said, they called you.
Yes.
They got in touch with you, and there are some things, some business ventures that you will
It's
have to
good.
put yourself out there and
Hmm.
and finagle and network or what have you to get out there. That's the nature of business. People aren't going to know your name if you don't put yourself out there,
Right.
right? But also when it comes to you doing that and how do you navigate yourself, people will start reaching out to you. They will start coming to you. You will start getting referrals and things of that nature where it's like, okay, it's confirmation of
Hmm.
this is my life. This is what I'm doing. Right.
Yes.
And it's okay if it just trickles in one by one.
Yeah.
But because we talked about that, we may not be able to save the whole world, but if we can save 5 people,
Yeah.
I'm good. Right.
5 people saved. Yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
So everything that Angel has, you're actually building your website. So you'll have a website soon.
I have one. I just don't know how to work it. But I have one. It's actually. I even have to look at it because I even forgot. It's actually Rodriguez or www author Angel Rodriguez .com. Yeah,
Okay.
www authorangelrodriguez.com. I just have to know how to navigate it.
And you will, and you're taking the steps to get it to
Yeah.
understand it. So everything that he has, ways to reach him for his artwork, his links to his book, anything else that he has that would be beneficial for everyone. I will list it under the podcast in his podcast bio, and then you
Mhm.
guys can just go there. Angel, I know that you're on Instagram because
Yeah.
that's where we
Yes.
touch base. So, what is your Instagram handle?
Um, I got Angel Art Rodriguez 21. Angel is my. It's my. I'm a little nervous now because I'm forgetting my
That's okay.
handle. Wow,
That's okay.
I'm so bad at technology.
That's all
Is it
right. But I'll
Angel
have it
Art?
listed.
Yeah, and I didn't even have my business card. I could have just looked at the business
That's
card.
all right.
I
But
can give it to you at the end
yeah,
and just because
and
it's
just
I don't know what
I'll
I'm
have
gonna
it listed, and then you'll be able to
do.
get in contact with him
Yeah,
there.
I'll
And
find it for you in 2 seconds. I'm
okay,
sorry. I just got nervous now looking for. Wow, I told you, me and technology, I'll get fired. Angel Silhouette 21. I don't
that's his
even.
Instagram. And his you'll see a lot of his art on his Instagram
Yeah,
as well. That's where it's at,
yeah,
right?
yes.
Okay. Well, Angel, I thank you so much for coming into the Shadow
Oh,
Box
thank
and
you.
just sharing your story with us and just shedding light on a whole lot that men, especially, are
Yes.
not comfortable talking about. And I just thank you, and I'm very grateful that I got the chance to meet you and talk to you, and that you decided
Thank you.
pro life, right, so that we could
Yes,
have this experience. I really am grateful to
yes.
you.
Thank you. And likewise, you've been nothing but a gem of beautiful person. You've been easy to open up to. And I'm grateful for the opportunity. And, I hope they see your information too, because you are remarkable. You've been doing this. You have these stories and podcasts that people needs to get in and listen to and hear your stuff. And very appreciative that you gave me the opportunity in the space for it. And I would like to say a number 988. If anybody ever is going through anything, any suicidal thinking, any type of mental health, you can dial 988 and it's going to be confidential. Whoever's on the other line won't know nothing about you, but it'll be something to help you with anybody out there that needs it.
Awesome. Thank you, Angel.
Thank
So,
you so much.
everyone else, I thank you for coming into the Shadow Box and sharing this time with us.